Okay, so he's just put it on now to start the streaming on the YouTube channel. So we are live, but we won't start for another 8 minutes. Okay, just to let you know. But we can just have a little chat now. So, yeah. Maybe do you want to just give a bit of a summary about what's happening with Nuffield in your countries? You know, given that it's a travel program, what are some of the things that are happening or that aren't happening at the moment? Olivier, what's happening in France for Nuffield France?
Lack of money. No, the fact is we during a long time it was just one Nuffield scholar each year, so it was the French one in 2001, and slowly we had a good team to handle the foundation here. So now we are able to during many years we are able to sign 3 scholars, and now we are back to to 2 scholars, and we expect to go back to 3 scholars during the next year. The good thing is when I start myself nearly 20 years ago, it was extremely difficult to explain to French people what Nuffield is. And now young farmers start to know, nearly all of them heard about it, and they know what we are saying about when we talk about a Nuffield scholarship. And so we need long time to implement like it can be done in Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. I think so in other countries like Brazil, it should go much faster. And for France, during a long time, it was really hard to find people who were able to speak a bit of English. And I greatly improved my English during the year of Nuffield. And now young farmers, most of them had been abroad to learn English. So now it's really less a problem for the scholar.
Yeah, great. And Yvonne, what's happening in Netherlands? Let's stick in the Europe.
Yeah, they wanted to finish this year. Also, the people who are planning to travel and they can't, but they still planned to finish it, even though they couldn't finish it in total. Yeah, they don't want to delay, I think. So they have to do it like we do it now, online.
And how long has Nuffield been going in the Netherlands, and how's the spirit of Nuffield overall in the Netherlands?
Well, it's growing. It's growing. It is since, I think, 8 or 9 years in the Netherlands now, and they are still growing. And that group is quite close. They chat a lot and they have a lot of contact, and we have one WhatsApp group. So, well, there's quite a lot of contact in between the different farmers. And they're all, well, they have one thing in common, that they are all very ambitious. And that's what you feel in that group. So they still, they stay asking each other. So, do you know something? Who? And then there's a lot of comments under the question. So it is really nice to be part of it.
Yeah, great. Good news. And Julian, what's happening in New Zealand?
It's winter here at the moment. So Nuffield is kind of beavering along, doing what it normally does when we're all kind of hibernating. We start looking for new applicants next month, and then they'll get interviewed in August. And hopefully we can do some traveling again, but it's with the pandemic, it's going to be tough, I think. The ones that were awarded a scholarship this year are doing a lot of Skype meetings and internal travel, but because the borders are closed, it is very difficult at the moment. We've just changed some of our administration. So Anne has stepped down. So some of you might remember Anne, who was our New Zealand manager. and we have just appointed a new person. So he has a military background, very well organised, and he's going to bring a different skill set to the position, which is great.
Yeah, fantastic. And can you just explain a bit how, I had a look on the Nuffield New Zealand website, and there's like rural leaders and the Kellogg's program and Nuffield. So how does all that work together?
So leadership, rural leadership is segmented, and we see Nuffield as the pinnacle of rural leadership in New Zealand. But there's plenty of opportunity for other leadership where people don't want to be industry leaders, but they want to be leaders of their community or of their cooperative or something like that. So we have a Kellogg leadership course, which is open to people who, not saying they want to be less ambitious than a Nuffielder, but they have different ambitions, or they're not bona fide farmers. So they are in support industries, and those support industries want to get closer to the farming industry. So the Kellogg's is more appropriate for perhaps farm advisors and bankers and fertilizer reps and the like, who want to be in the industry and associated with the industry, but not as a farmer.
Yeah, cool. Nice,
Julian?
nice synergy.
Julian, today New Zealand was a very hot topic in the Netherlands because of the COVID. That, well, you were an example for us. Yeah. And today there are some new patients in your country, isn't it? Two. But it is on the news every hour here.
So they were given bereavement. So they were in isolation, and their mother or father died. Their mother died, I think, and they were allowed to go out of their containment to attend the funeral, and they weren't tested before they were released. And then they drove, so New Zealanders to two islands. They drove the length of the North Island to go out of containment down to where their father was. And unfortunately, they have now tested positive. And so we are quite critical of our health officials that they didn't follow good process in releasing these people, or they shouldn't have been released, I think is the real answer, that they shouldn't have been released until they were tested and proven to be clear of COVID. And so now
the party is over.
We've been through a lot of pain like the rest of the world, and we've been in complete lockdown. So for the first time in many years, I don't even have a common cold. So it's probably the healthiest I've been for so long, because we've been in social distancing. We've been apart. I've been for the first 6 weeks, I was in my own bubble. So I was actually living apart from the rest of my family. I was spending all day on the phone or on Zoom meetings, and we were directing our businesses differently. And because of that isolation, the most dangerous thing was to go to the supermarket, and we're all wearing masks and hand sanitizers and staying at least 2 meters apart, and we're only allowed so many people into the shops at times, and we're standing in big long lines and queues out in the car parks, and it would take you an hour to get into the supermarket, and then you do your grocery shopping for once a week, and get home and lock the door. It's really crazy. And we've been through all of that, and then in a business where thousands of people have lost their jobs, and then to have something as crazy as people not being tested before they're left out has upset everyone.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah, not cool. Okay, sorry, I'd already moved on. It's it's an awkward reality, isn't it? And I think it's a real challenge for leadership of of our time is how to deal with this COVID crisis. It doesn't certainly come with a manual or a recipe, and there's so much kind of leadership needing to happen on people's feet, and whether it's at a government or a society civilian level, it's the compassion and the dedication to get through it the best we can. But it's 4 o'clock and we've already got a bunch of people that have joined us on our YouTube channel. So welcome everybody to the second of our Nuffield Talks worldwide webinar series. It's a really exciting event. It's you know, Nuffield is an amazing network. It's been around for 70 years and there's 2,000 people around the world that are actively participating in the Nuffield network. So these webinars are a chance for just a couple of those people from the network to get together, and we choose a topic that's relevant and contemporary, and just hear some people's views on it. The format that we use for this is really quite informal. So the 4 panelists who will have an introduction from shortly will talk a little bit on the topic, and then we're just going to answer everyone's questions. So yeah, I guess a little bit more just about Nuffield is that we invest in the most critically important resource to agribusiness, to the agriculture sector, which is people and people's leadership capabilities. So this is done through offering scholarships to emerging leaders, and then they travel around the world looking at topics that are important to their country and take those learnings back and implement those learnings over time. And we say over time because they say that Nuffield is not a program. Nuffield is something that you become a Nuffield scholar. You don't just do a program. So people stay engaged in the program for the rest of their lives and stay engaged with their network. What else can I tell you? So yeah, I think one thing that's really nice about Nuffield is we're connected by a set of values. So we're open to having robust conversations. We know that we come from different realities. We know that cultural context is really important in the reasons of why people do what they do. So we've got the privilege today of having 4 different people from different sectors, from different countries, and we can have a genuine open conversation about different views. And our topic today is about how agribusiness is viewed in your country and what we can learn from each other. So in saying that, these 4 people they're practical people, and they have their everyday lives. 3 are farmers and 1 is a TV presenter. So, you know, they're representing their own views, and that's what's great about it. We just get a practical insight from 4 different people. So I'll get them to introduce themselves, but first I'll just introduce myself. My name's Sally Thompson. I'm an Australian and I'm living in Brazil now for the last 6 years, and I live on a dairy farm, and I've been part of bringing Nuffield to Brazil, which has been just a great way to build a really interesting network across Brazil in such a short time. For the people who are listening, you can just write on the chat, say a quick hi and tell us where you're from so we can get an idea. Out of the registrations, we had 15 different countries that are going to be represented here on the talk today, so a genuinely diverse audience, and over 50% of you have said that you're farmers. So what a great way for farmers to connect from all different parts of the world. Right, so let's get on to our panelists, because that's why you're here. If you'd just like to introduce yourselves quickly and say who you are, where you're from. I think it's nice to say what time it is in your country at the moment, and what's happening in your business at the at this time of year. So let's start with Victor.
Hello everyone. Hello Sally. It's my pleasure to be here. It's really good to talk a little bit about agribusiness. It's always a pleasure to talk about our business. My name is Victor. I am an agronomist. We have 2 main businesses. We have a lab in the state in Ribeirão Preto, state of São Paulo. My dad and my mom, they started the lab. We are one of the first private labs in Brazil, and we work in almost all the states in Brazil. We also are farmers. We grow coffee and have beef cattle in the state of Minas Gerais. It's close one to each other because they are close to the borders. It's the southeast part of Brazil. It's 4 p.m. now in Brazil, and we are in a very, very busy time in both business because the labs, we have a lot of samples in this time of the year. And also in the coffee sector, we are doing the harvest. So we are just harvesting. We are in our farm, we are something about 30% of the total harvest. So it's a very busy time, but it's a very fascinating time because we do this harvest with a lot of passion. It's really important this time for us.
Thanks, Victor. Yvonne.
My name is Yvonne. Thank you for the invitation. I am happy to be here online. I live in the Netherlands, very close to Amsterdam. It's 9 p.m. and it's well, almost a thunderstorm outside. So hopefully the internet will stay. In our country, it's now not a calm time. It is very moving because our farmers just had a kind of a protest of, well, it was amazing because they are really very angry because of all the laws, all the environmental laws in the Netherlands were changing, well, almost every year. And they were with all their tractors going on the street to the political capital of the Netherlands, The Hague, to have their very big protest. So the farming world was really upset, well, till the time COVID came, and then we didn't talk about farming anymore. But in the months before, it was, well, everyone in the Netherlands was talking about our farmers and how to get them to a sustainable future. And I'm making programs of farming, all kinds of programs. So I'm filming every day, even in the COVID time.
Wow, great. And we'll come back and get a bit more detail on your programs, Yvonne. It sounds a really important and a really different, a really unique thing that you're doing in the Netherlands. Julian, what's happening in New Zealand?
So my name is Julian Rain. So I live in New Zealand. So I live at the top of the South Island. So there's a North Island and South Island. I'm at the very top of the South Island. So it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's still dark out there. We're in winter here. We're kind of two bits to our business. So one is farming in an agricultural sense, where we milk cows. We have 2 dairy farms, and we also raise beef and forestry as well. So that's our agricultural part of the business. And then we have a fruit part. So we have 8 different orchards growing apples, gold kiwi fruit, and berries. So it's wintertime with the fruit, and we are a mixture of out in the field with pruning and training. And we are still in the pack house packing apples for export. So we are, with our fruit business, pretty much concentrated on export, whereas our own dairy business is concentrated on the domestic market. So we're quite unusual. We supply milk not only for drinking milk for our local communities, but we supply milk for 2 cheese makers and a couple of ice cream makers as well. So we're a diverse business. So what's happening in New Zealand at the moment? Obviously, COVID is a big part of our lives. For the agri sector, it hasn't really affected us much other than social distancing. So during the fruit harvest, all of our employees, we have 130 pickers, and they had to maintain social distancing. The majority of those people live on site, and we had to put them all in their own little bubble. So it's been complicated, but manageable. Whereas tourism business has been devastated by lack of overseas visitors. So you've got 2 extremes. The rural sector, which has largely been unaffected, but tourism and urban has been very affected by COVID. My connection to Nuffield is I was a 97 scholar, so 1997, a long time ago, last century. I'm old. I'm kind of old thinking. I'm the past chairman of Nuffield New Zealand. So what I tried to bring is a lot of young people through the organisation to create new leaders, new thinking, fresh thinking, and New Zealand thinking, I suppose. And then we have, I think, a very good selection process that then invests in the people. The people, as you said, Sally, in your introduction, people for a life commitment to Nuffield and to bring leadership qualities to the nation of New Zealand as a group of farmers and agribusiness, but also committed to their communities and industries. So that's a quick summary of us in New Zealand.
That's great. It is a quick summary because Julian sent me through his profile, and I tell you it was about this long, and I was like, how am I going to condense that? But thank you. And Olivia, welcome.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde. Hello everybody. So I'm Olivier Guinec. I'm a farmer in the west of France. I'm very close from Brest in Brittany. Do you hear me? It's okay. So I'm farming on the dairy farm with my brother. We are on a wet part of the France, so we are very focused on a grass-based system. So after my Nuffield trip to New Zealand, where I did in 2002 to study the people who were milking once a day, it was the early days of once a day milking. Slowly, when I come back, slowly I push my business to New Zealand style system with cows dried off in winter, spring calving, and grass only, no cake. And like many people who are relying on grass in France, we eventually went to organic dairy. So we just stopped to put fertilizer, and we have a big demand for this. Alongside, I'm trying to bring young people in the farm. So on another way than Julian is doing, we shelter a young lady who is doing vegetable on a small plot of 1 hectare. She's doing everything, selling direct to consumer, and it's working quite well. And then with this success, we rebuilt an old barn for a guy who has a part-time job as a brewer. So he's producing our local beer, La Mignonne. And now we are just finishing to build a small lab for a guy who is born in Brooklyn, in the US, who decided to produce cheese with our milk. So we sell him part of our milk. The rest is going to the normal factory with Sodial, who is producing, for example, Yoplait or Candia. Good.
Fantastic.
And it's 9 o'clock in the evening, and we are in the end of the summer, and I still see a bit the sun.
It'll be coming to Julian shortly then. Great. So let's jump into the topic, and we'll just get again each of the panelists to just give some opening remarks on how agribusiness is viewed in your country. And this topic has been left deliberately broad. Even when I think about agribusiness, I think about, well, there's farmers, there's farming, there's food. Just to begin, there's 3 different really important elements in that word agribusiness. So but just a couple of opening remarks from each of you would be wonderful. We'll start with Victor.
Hello, Sally. Talking about like how agribusiness is viewed here in Brazil, I would like to let's say that we face 2 different roads at the same time, because one is the deforestation side. Let's say when we go to the bad part of people looking to the agribusiness, but on the other hand, we see how it's becoming much more clear how important the agribusiness is to support our country, and how the agribusiness is putting our economy up. And now during the COVID, where a lot of businesses are closed, it's becoming much more important how the agribusiness is holding our economy and holding our country. So I think it's changing a lot the way that people see agribusiness here in Brazil. Talking about the people from the cities, the big cities, looking to the agribusiness and looking how important it is to our country. But what we always need to remember is that Brazil is very big, so it's very diverse. So how people in the south or in the northeast are looking to the agribusiness are different, and a lot of our people, they have relatives that coming from farms, for example. So sometimes they live in the town, but they have their grandfather or someone that that came from farming or something like that. So we have this close relation, but this become more difficult when you go to the big town, the big cities like São Paulo, for example, where you sometimes you already lost these connections. And I think we can improve a lot the communication, like how I think the people in the cities need to learn more what happens in the farm. If I could share my screen, I would like to show. Uh, I don't know why it's not allowing. Because
Try again, Victor. Is that any better?
no, it's not running.
Okay, you might just need
But
to paint the picture in our minds.
yeah, anyway, um, when we talk about deforestation, a lot of people think about Brazil with a big, like looking the forests down. And one thing that is important for us to bring is that is a graph showing that is like more than 60% of our land is native forest. So like we just have 80%, so 0.8 that is agriculture in Brazil. So when we bring these numbers to people and people see these kind of numbers, they realize like how important is agribusiness in Brazil in a very, very small piece of Brazil and how we are protecting our forests. And a lot of people don't know that. And so I think it's a really, we have a big role that is show these numbers to the to the people in general, and not only inside of Brazil, but we depend a lot of exports. So people overseas need also to understand and to see these kind of things. And traveling around the world during my Nuffield trips, it was really interesting to see how in different places they see Brazilian agribusiness. So when we go to Asia, for example, how they are seeing, like sometimes they don't know what's happening here. When we go to Europe, it was really clear to see like a lot of people in Europe, they telling about Brazilian agribusiness as they know a lot of what's happening here, but a very wrong image with a lot of wrong numbers. And when we go to US, for example, that they travel a lot to Brazil, they know much more what's really happening here. So it's interesting to see how this view of the Brazilian agribusiness is different in different places of the world. And so that's why I think communication is really important. And also just to make a conclusion.
Victor, can I ask you something? Do
Oh
you
yeah,
think
sure.
the people in Europe have a wrong vision of the Brazil agricultural sector?
People want where?
The people of Europe, they think wrongly about the Brazilian agricultural sector.
It was really common for me to see a lot of wrong data and people in Europe talking about Brazilian agribusiness. We felt very like this data that I told about the native forest, for example. They had no idea, for example, but sometimes they were really confident to say things that about like Brazil is taking like is putting down all the forest, and when we show the numbers, oh, it's interesting to see we didn't know that. And sometimes in other places they ask you the numbers and they ask you things. And in many cases in Europe they know what they are saying, but in practice it's a wrong vision. And it was
Good to
really
know.
common for me to see. And also I think that it's interesting. Another thing that was a very big conclusion for me during my Nuffield trips, that is there are two parallel worlds. And there were like some pictures here that I would like to show, but go without the pictures that are, in my opinion, that are very two different roads running in parallel. When I was in Japan, for example, that we were in a glass house with all the control with temperature, air, like everything, to a very premium market. And this, like 1 week before, we were in Finland, where they had like a rice production using animals because they didn't have any machines, for example, and they were just trying to produce food and cheap food. So it's a, I think these two roads, one wants really cheap food. They don't have enough food, and so they just need cheap food. And there's another road where they want a premium product. They want to know where it comes from, if it's sustainable or not. And it's really difficult for us to say if one is wrong or right. They just need different things, and they are willing to see and willing to pay for different prices. And sometimes I see that when we talk about the general picture of agribusiness, we have to understand that we have two different roads looking to the same picture. And so sometimes it's a big challenge for us to communicate to these different markets. And I think as a farmer, we are trying to change a lot of this, and the coffee has a big role on that, because coffee is a lot of people like love the coffee and wants to understand more. And so, for example, in our farm and a lot of our other farmers are opening their doors to show what happens inside, so the consumers can understand what happens behind the gate. And I think it will be really important to change and to get better with this view about the agribusiness in general.
Fantastic. Thanks, Victor. Yvonne, can you just give us some opening remarks, please, from Netherlands perspective?
Yeah, like I've said, it is a very confusing time at the moment, because the farmers stand up just half a year ago, and it was really impressive what they did. They were quite silent for years and years, and now they said it is enough. We have a story, and we have to stay in the Netherlands. And sometimes they have the feeling that the government doesn't want them anymore. The Netherlands is a very small country, a very busy country. Maybe for you it feels like one city. So every farm is really close to a village or even close to a city. So, well, it is a big city compared to your countries. So there's always a fight between the village, the cities, and the farming and the nature. And that's what, has a big conflict at the moment. What are we going to choose as a country? Do we want to have nature, or do we want to have farming? And it is very efficient, but that is, well, then you have a lot of animals at a really small place in big barns. And maybe for you in your country, our biggest farm is your smallest farm. But when it is close to a village, people are complaining about it and they are worried. So it is a very big issue, and they have to solve the problem right now. There are a lot of farmers who have to say goodbye to a lot of animals. So they don't have the possibility to be a free entrepreneur. They are really, they have to get smaller and smaller because the people want it. So the farmers has to choose, what are we going to do in the future? If you want to grow in the Netherlands, well, you can't forget. So what are ways to have a future? Maybe start an organic farm, or start a shop on your farm, or, well, you have to be very creative. And also you have to include the nature in your farm, because otherwise you don't have a future in the Netherlands. So it is a lot of farmers are really worried. How are we going to survive in this time? So it is, sometimes it feels a little bit as a revolution, a time where everything is changing. And then there is the COVID, and that changes people's view on farming. And sometimes it's positive because people in the Netherlands realize how much they need the farmers to have safe food, clothes. Well, everyone is going to the supermarket and takes everything. So they feel how the farmers is needed in the Netherlands. So a lot of farmers are hoping that they get some more respect and maybe some more freedom. But well, at the election we will see. But it is really, really, yeah, but they are very worried. A lot of farmers are, well, yeah, in the Netherlands we say farmers can complain a lot, but at this moment they are really worried.
And Yvonne, can you just quickly tell us a quick summary about the Farmers Looking for Love program that you're involved with? What's that achieving for communicating agribusiness?
Well, I think in a lot of countries, like in France and maybe in New Zealand, I don't know, but in 26 countries, the program exists. And in the Netherlands, it's called Boer zoekt vrouw. It is Farmer Wants a Wife, or L'amour est dans la pré, or Boer zoekt een vrouw. All those titles go around the world. And it is about single farmers looking for love. That's where the story, well, that's where the show is about. And I'm the presenter for more than 15 years now. And it is on the public TV in the Netherlands. In most of the countries, they broadcast it on the commercial TV, which makes it a little bit different. We are really looking for love and not for, well, a kind of a commercial story about farming. And well, it is quite successful because in the last 15 years, we have more than 25 marriages and more than 80 babies are born out of love in the show. And because that show is so successful, not only because of the love, but also because of all the people who watch the show, which is, well, quite big in the Netherlands. We develop different formats, because how can we use the success of this show, which is so successful, how can we use on a positive way the people and the farmers who are in that show to tell the real farm stories? So take the camera and put it to the other side and look what's happening on the farm right now. And that makes very interesting TV, because you have loved farmers who are telling the story, which is sometimes, well, really hard and not romantic at all. So it gives us the possibility to make that show on a big platform, the biggest broadcaster in the Netherlands, to tell the real farming story. And that is, well, never ending, as you all understand.
Fantastic. Thanks, Yvonne. Now, Julian, would you make some opening remarks, please, from a New Zealand perspective?
So how is agribusiness viewed in New Zealand? So we are similar to the previous Victor and Yvonne, where there's a bit of misinformation, as well as the farmers aren't feeling the love. So we have a bit of both, I suppose. So New Zealand is a food producer, like the Netherlands and like Brazil. And we export about 90% of the produce that we grow here. But we have an urban population that is saying that we need to improve our environmental footprint, and we need to improve it dramatically. So they want to see better water quality in New Zealand across all sectors. So it's not just dairying or sheep and beef, it's also forestry, horticulture as well. So there's a wide range of pressure is coming from us as to how we protect our environment, as well as produce the food that we want, high quality food. We want to produce cheap food for our domestic supply, but high quality, expensive food for discerning customers around the world for export revenues. So there's a bit of a dilemma that we actually have there. One of the things that has been a farmer initiative here is called Meet the Need, which has been to provide food for food banks and people who are short of money to be able to support the community so that meat and dairy is freely available to our local communities, which I think is great. But just like Yvonne was saying, there's the farmers are feeling a lot of pressure here, that we feel quite unloved. It's certainly leading to issues with mental health, that because if you're told you're bad all the time, it wears some farmers down, and it's taking its toll. So there's kind of a mixed bag here. We're also seeing reforestation. So some sheep farms, particularly hill sheep farms, are going back into forestry. And they're wanting to do that for a number of reasons. One for soil control and the other one for carbon sequestration. And carbon farming is becoming a thing. So we are going out of some pastoral back into forests. So it's a reverse of Victor's situation. So it's really interesting times here in New Zealand.
Great summary of a complex topic, isn't it? I don't know if an hour is going to do this justice, but we can do our best. Now, Olivier, I'm just looking for your PowerPoint to share.
I find it myself while people were talking. So if I will put it. Maybe I can do it right now. I see that. Do you see it? I will go on the first track. Okay, here we have a few pictures about the French farming. So on the top, you will see France is first the landscape, and with 50 million of tourists every year, I think people from abroad appreciate the landscape, but French society as well. Second picture is the annual farm show in Paris, where 1 million of Parisians see cows and farm animals. It's a good way to have contact with farmers. And after on the left, you have all the quality label we use in France, organic, label rouge, AOC, etc. I pass on more. And eventually we have the L'amour est dans le pré that Yvonne will like. And just to, we can, yes, I go back on the screen. So just to explain that French people like their farmer, but they don't like what farmers are doing. You heard me? I explained there is because there is always the traditional picture of farming, and what plenty of people have a wrong picture of what farmer is. Otherwise, the example I gave before, just on the picture, where a good way to try to improve the perception of farming. But I think, yes, some French people doesn't like always what farmers are doing with always the same pollution, animal welfare, etc., etc. And so much that the French community find a new name to call this. It's called agribashing. Does it mean something to you? It means always to complain about against farmers. And I think but from the farmer point of view, it was a huge mistake to talk about this agribashing, because there is a few on the, how to say, the French society have overall anyway a good perception of farming, and we need to give good explanation to the people and to solve some problem. For example, in Brittany, there is so in the west of France, we are the biggest place for animal production. Roughly, Brittany produce half of the animal production of France, or not 1/3 of production of France, and we have for many years we have a water pollution problem. We know the reality of this problem with nitrate, etc. It's a bit like the same in Holland, and we have all the solution. It can be difficult to implement for farmers, but most of the farming community prefer to hide his head in the sand like an ostrich. And I believe it was a huge mistake, and that's partly why we decided to go on organic farming, because we're always thinking that if there is a problem as an entrepreneur, we have to solve it, and we are doing it all the time. And so the pollution problem and the difficult relationship with the society is exactly the same. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm still a bit worried about this.
No, you're doing, it's fantastic. Thank you, Olivia. No, we can hear you fine, and your accent is enticing, so it's a good thing.
A bit exotic, I suppose.
Let's jump into our questions. We've got the first one here is from Andre Novo, and he says, Yvonne, do you think that the end of the quota system, at least for dairy farming, has had a role in this recent revolution?
Yeah, I think so, because then when you stop with the quota, then there is coming something else. There will always be restrictions in such a small country, but they didn't know for a very long time what it would be. So it was kind of, well, you just choose something, but you didn't know if it was the wrong decision. And some are lucky now, and some aren't, and that's well. That's a difficult point, because when you don't know where it's going to, you don't know what to choose with your farm. And in our program, we want to show both. So we want to show the lucky ones who chooses the right thing, to not to grow, but to be specific on some elements. But you also want to understand the farmers who thought that they choose right, but they didn't. And sometimes, well, there is a kind of a view, an opinion. Everyone has an opinion. And when you say in the Netherlands, it is very intensive farming and very efficient, there's always a negative aura because you think, oh, when you have so many animals, you can't be good for them all. So people have a negative vibe of intensive farming, but still that farmer has a lot of compassion with his animals and thought he had the right, he made the right decisions. And not even the farmer, but also the banks and the governments and all the people who come on the farm advised him to do this. And now the government decided something else and he's in deep trouble. And that, yeah, that makes it very difficult.
Great, thanks, Yvonne. There's a question here from Carol Kassane, and sorry if I got that wrong. And I'll ask it, I think, to Olivier on behalf of the EU. The question is, does it suit us to say all Brazilian agriculture is destroying the Amazon so as to try keeping trade barriers in place to keep the likes of beef from Brazil out of the EU?
How to start? As a farmer, I've got two kind of view and two perception of the Brazilian farm system. If I read general newspaper or French TV, okay, it's what Victor said, GMO, Amazon destruction, etc. But when I go through serious farming information, like in the agricultural press or through the internet about farming, I know that for example, Brazil was the head of the no-till movement. And I think many agronomists came from South America with the idea of no-till, direct seeding, etc., like people like Roberto Lamarca. I think it's Brazilian, I'm not sure. Carlos Crovetto Lamarca, and they were doing extremely interesting work about this. And part of the highest improvement of farming system is coming from Brazil. And so I've got mitigated opinion, but I know that most of the general news we had about Brazil is crap. Okay, this being said, about the trade agreement between Europe and South America, it's obvious that we can't compete in Europe about the price of beef or whatever you want with South America. It's obvious. We have got people around them, when they have beef cattle, they live with 100 cow, and it's nothing to compare with Brazil, like it's nothing to compare to what Australian can do or New Zealander. The fact is, in France, we have a tradition of high quality food, and the only way we can compete is staying in this high quality. And I've got, going back to the Nuffield, I think it was 4 years ago, I had a group of Nuffield mostly from Australia and Brazil. And we were as we were in France, it was at this time of the year, it was the end of spring. We are going to a nice restaurant in Crêperie in Brittany, eating crepe on a marvelous place with old houses around. And I had in front of me some of the best farmers in the world, with extremely efficient and big farms everywhere, and they were amazed what I was giving them. And I was thinking in myself, in France, we are absolutely uncompetitive. There is no point. These people in front of me are much better. But the fact is, here it's France. We have a culture of food for various reasons, the size of the country, the different people coming here, and we have a very good tradition of high quality food. And in fact, France was 1% of the world population, roughly 1% of the farming production. And we must concentrate if we want to export to this level of top quality, like we do quite well with wine or fine cheese, and we can do it for other products, and maybe more cheese, more wine, I don't know. And so I think there is as well the big trend of local food, and I see with the small business we are developing on our farm, people, a good part of the French population actually want to pay more for his food, but they want to know what they eat. They want to be able to trust the farmer. They want to see what's going on the farm, and we have still a very good possibility to improve this level of trust with the farmer. It's not exactly only the farmer who is doing direct selling to consumer, but there is plenty of small companies who can work locally, that people can always have an eye on them to see to be able to trust them. That's it.
Great, thanks, Olivier. Jumping to a question from where was it? Andre Fukugati from Bahia in Brazil. Taking into account, I was thinking of asking this to Julian and Victor, taking into account new, more digital generation of growers, how do you see the importance and growth of ag digital influencers to change the game? So Victor, do you want to have a go at that first? Or Julian, I'll give you a chance to think, but because you're involved in a lot of exports, I thought it would be interesting to get your view.
Okay. Yeah, I think the ag digital influencers has a very big, a very important role on this to change this, let's say, change this game. I think one of the things that is really important is the traceability. As Olivier said, like the consumers, if they're willing to pay more, they want to know what's happening. They want to trust that, and also bringing Ingrid is a Nuffield scholar, a Brazilian Nuffield scholar from this year, and she's studying about like how to communicate sustainability. And one of the things that I think it will pass through this digital informations, because if you have more if you have this information easier and if you communicate it easier and better, you can have more connections and trust more this information. And then I think you are going to feel this gap of misinformation, because I think a lot of these problems of information about what's happening in the farm and in the urban people is really misinformation. I think there is some barriers and something like that happening, but the misinformation is the most important. And so I think the ag digital influencers and the platforms and the, let's say, the 4.0 agriculture, they have a big role to bring more information from the farm to the cities.
Thanks, Victor. And Julian, what can you add to that?
Probably, I agree with Victor. There's probably one other one, and that is really around social media and the information and the ability for social media to impact on people's image of what is happening. So that is both good and bad. And like in Victor's opening comments, it was bad, but it can also be very good. So we are trying to bring the people onto the farm through digital means, with cameras and films, like webinars. Social media can assist in that way as well. So there's good and bad in both. Certainly having traceable systems is an absolute imperative for the modern farmer now.
Thanks, Julian. Question from Michael Brady from Ireland for Yvonne. And Yvonne, will current Dutch farmers consider selling and going to farm in other countries like they have done in the past?
Just to move, to emigrate.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a big issue. We have that show, Farmer Wants a Wife, in the Netherlands, and after 8 or 9 years, we had so many people, farmers, Dutch farmers from abroad, who wanted to join the program because they are single and living all over the world. So we thought, well, let's make a show about that. So we had a whole show. We call it Farmer Wants a Wife International, because there are Dutch farmers in Zambia, in Texas, in Canada, in France, in Denmark, in Romania, everywhere. So we choose 5 farmers from abroad and brought our Dutch ladies to the farm there. And that shows us what kind of entrepreneurs they are in another country and how much freedom they feel over there. And for now, that's really interesting, because we have all over the world connections with Dutch farmers on Dutch TV. And last year it was very interesting, because there's one farmer, he moved from the Netherlands to Canada 15 years ago. And the reason is, of course, that the Dutch farmers don't feel the freedom to grow and to be a farmer without that much rules. So he started his business there and it went really well. But because of less rules, of course, there's more possible, but also the difficult things are possible. And it is the whole GMO thing. In the Netherlands, we don't have it. It doesn't exist in the Netherlands, not on a scale where I think in Brazil, sorry, Victor, or in somewhere else in the world, they use all the GMO seeds and crops and food for the animals. So he had a big issue with his cows, with the healthiness of his cows. So he started growing his own food instead of buying food from someone else. And his whole farm got improved, got more healthy. His cows had less illnesses and stuff. So he was saying, well, I left the Netherlands because of all the rules, and now I'm in Canada, and I think the rules weren't that bad, which makes it very funny, because the question is the grass always more green on the other side? And
Fantastic.
of course,
I can add
that's how it feels.
I can add something.
Sure, please,
Yeah.
Olivia.
Yes, just to say, during in the past we had many Dutch farmers immigrating in Brittany, and actually maybe the grass was not greener here, but actually it was interesting people. They were involved in the farming community and good neighbor for most of them, and we are quite happy to have them. And moreover, considering the demography of the farmers in France, we will need more of them.
Oh,
Sure.
really?
Oh, yes.
Maybe they will come after this crisis here in the Netherlands.
But we have really a demographic issue, and it's especially the medium-sized farm, the traditional family farm. We need huge amount of capital. There is less and less young people interested in France. They like small business, like I see with my friends here. Young people now, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, I don't know, but they want something who is always reversible. That they really hardly engage in a lifetime choice.
Yeah,
so,
but it is an actual. Sorry.
Sorry, I might just jump in and go to the next question because our time's a bit short already. It's a question for New Zealand, Julian. Where do the bulk of your exports go to, and how is the relationship between New Zealand and China, given the recent happenings with Australia and China?
I'm certainly going to try and avoid a diplomatic disaster here by not answering that one directly, Sally. But we export all around the world. So our dairy products go, so we do supply some milk to Fonterra, and I believe they go to something like 130, 140 countries. There is a lot of tariffs against Fonterra, so that is an impediment. So our government has been working really hard to sign free trade agreements, particularly in Asia, and they've done a good job. We export our fruit again right around the world, particularly into Asia is a really great place. We're finding it more and more difficult to send it to Europe. The Europeans, even though we're counter-cyclical, the Europeans, how do I say this nicely, they're quite protectionist of their people and their markets. Even though we're counter-cyclical, they make it difficult. So I'm wearing a boysenberry shirt at the moment. So we export boysenberries to 11 countries around the world. So from Scandinavia, Germany, Middle East, Australia. So we are quite global in what we do, and we go to where the market is. It doesn't matter what the food group is. We endeavour to find the best markets for our produce. But we do find we get beaten up a lot by countries wanting to protect their own farmers. And it doesn't matter where we are in the globe. It's a thing.
Okay, I'll just get you to, there's a question here from Murilu Betahelu, and he says, do you believe that the countries are going to increase agricultural barriers as a result of COVID? Julian?
I'm not sure about that. Certainly, what I've observed locally in New Zealand, we're very free markets. So it's really around trust, and do you trust this produce? We think we have a really good name for trusted produce right around the world. So I think we will see people looking for trusted products a lot more, but they will also get quite patriotic and look to support their own farmers in their own country. So it depends on the food group, I suspect, Sally.
Yeah, Olivia, would you like to, have you an opinion to add quickly to that one? It's probably our last question, actually. Do you think that there'll be increased trade barriers as a consequence of COVID?
I believe in free market. That's true. And the fact, if the question is, there is two aspects. There is the trade barrier, and there is the mental barrier of people. And the fact is, if how to say, when consumer trust the product, they can go to take it anywhere. If they feel uncomfortable with some product, they will try to find an alternative way. And for example, even to go back, even for very basic stuff like the frozen lasagna scandal a few years ago, where instead of beef, horses meat eventually end up in the plate. People were not expecting a lot with this, but they were ashamed that instead of eating beef like it was on the label, they were eating horse. And they don't, even when you don't expect a lot from a product, at least you expect that what is written on the label is true. And so it was a few scandals like this make people a bit worried with the food. And if they don't trust the thing, they will go to maybe for something more local, better brand or whatever you want, but they will try to find the alternative way. But if you have a good stuff who come from abroad, who can be trusted with no major worries, there is no point to buy it. And the local, even if the French people are happy to support the French farmer, it's always the same. But everywhere in the world, people have the heart on the left and the wallet on the right. But maybe in France, we have the heart more on the left than other people, but maybe the wallet is even more on the right.
Yeah, good point. Look, our time has just flown by, so we've finished up our hour already. I think we'll just get each of the panelists to make just some final concluding remarks. But before that, for those that are listening, this webinar will stay available on our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe to that, you'll also get any notifications for any new webinars or any other videos that get uploaded to it. And just on behalf of Nuffield Brazil, it's a real pleasure to be able to be part of these webinars. We're doing them in Portuguese for a Brazilian audience and also these international ones. And you know, Nuffield Brazil is a recent family member of the Nuffield network, and it wouldn't be possible for us to be part of it without our investors, without our sponsors. So really just want to thank TIA, Grupo Bom Futuro, New Farm, Biotrigo, and Stara and Ribasolo, who have committed to growing the future of Brazilian agriculture by investing in people. So on that note, thank you to our four panelists. Let's hear just some final remarks from Mr. Victor Monsef from Brazil.
Sally, can I make a question to our panelists, or we are going to run out too much?
Let's just have the final remarks,
okay.
and then you can do it at the end, but just to acknowledge the time. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfectly. So first, thanks for inviting me to be here. It was really good to hear history from different countries. And definitely, I think my conclusion is we have to communicate much more and have more of this, more of communication in general to find this gap between countries, between different people, between farmers and consumers, and we are really willing to do that.
Great, thanks, Victor. Yvonne.
Yeah, maybe what I consider in my country is that farmers, well, that's what Julian said also, that farmers have the feeling that they are not respected and not loved by the people in their country. But I'm not a farmer, and I don't have that feeling at all. I have the feeling that just normal people in the cities and in the villages, they love the farmers. But there is a lot of things from the government and a lot of things in the media, which makes you feel that you're not loved by your own citizens. And I will never believe that, because I think, well, and I see it in my programs, that people are so curious and so involved by what's happening on the farm, and they want to hear the story and they want to understand it. So I simply don't believe in that. That's not true, because people do love farmers.
Fantastic. Thanks, Yvonne. Julian.
I have 3 points, Sally. The first one is farmers are friends with other farmers all around the world. I've always had a really warm welcome from every farmer that I've introduced myself to. So we have a network that is truly global. My second point is the pandemic that we're currently in. Every country is spending a lot of money. I feel quite sad that I think that the money that is being spent now probably should have been spent on ways of protecting our environment and protecting us against climate change. So I think that that is a huge issue for us. And my last point, and it's really a question, is the globalization of food and brands. Are we at a tipping point? And that we'll see a reversal of that, and we'll go back into smaller brands, less globalization. So that's my closing comment.
Great, thanks, Julian. And Olivier.
Yeah, to catch what Julian is saying, I was thinking, preparing the program, when you have big pebble in a box, there is room for smaller pebble. So if we have bigger and bigger company, and because of globalization, companies even in farming are becoming absolutely huge. This is but they can't fill everything, and it's like pebble, and they give room for plenty of smaller things at very different size, and we don't really know what will happen at the end. The fact is, I'm quite happy this evening, because it was a bit the same during my Nuffield trip. A farmer is a farmer, and everywhere in the world, and it's even considering the language problem, it's sometimes easier to talk to you all over the world as a farmer than sometimes I can do it with my close neighbor. Because we understand, and it was one of the high points of my Nuffield trip. It was the same. It was much easier to understand the Japanese farmer I have seen that sometimes retired people 20 meters from my home. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Look, what a wonderful last hour of conversation. I think we could still stay and continue with that, but I would just like to thank Olivia, Julian, Victor, and Yvonne. Thank you for your time, and thanks to the audience for some great questions. And there was some really good debate and some comments happening along in the chat as well. So I think there was some interesting discussion that was evolving there as well. It shows that we've certainly got plenty of work to do in communication, as well as production and distribution and management, and communication within the businesses. So thanks to everyone involved, and we wish you good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Au revoir.
Thank you.
Au revoir.
Oh yeah.